Down there, life continues. The traffic is awful, stocks go on trading, and Star Trek is still showing.
Good day, grade 9 learners. Welcome to today's Natural Sciences lesson. My name is Mr. Siada Madlala, and this lesson is proudly brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education. Today's topic is the last topic, or is the last line for the term, right? And we're still exploring life and living, and mainly under the topic body systems. So for today, under body systems, we'll be focusing more on the alimentary canal and digestion. Now, let's move on to our lesson objectives. Remember, this is what we need to achieve by the end of this lesson, right? So I need you to pay attention, take out your notebook, write down some notes as we proceed as well, right? So at the end of this lesson, you should be able to firstly define what the alimentary canal is, right? Secondly, you need to be able to identify the parts of the alimentary canal and their functions. Not only that, you need to be able also to describe the process of digestion. Are we together? Right now, all this information is found under the CAPS document on page 57. Now, moving on. For our pre-knowledge, remember that in grade 4, we discussed the topic of living things, right? We said that living things are able to carry out the 7 life processes, right? Then also we have a baseline assessment, right? So on a sheet of paper, write the name of each colored organ, right? You need to write the name of each colored organ looking at this diagram here, and you need to label it, right? So I'm going to give you 5 minutes quickly to copy down and write down the answers. Welcome back, grade 9s. Now let's look at our solutions, right? But before that, let me remind you, the baseline activity simply required you to give the correct what? Organ in the digestive system or the alimentary canal, right? By on a sheet of paper, you needed to write the name of each colored organ, right? So the colors green, red, pink, brown, purple, green, and yellow, right? So looking at our solutions now, right? This is the structure that we needed to be able to label. So for green, the first green there, it is the esophagus, right? This part here, it is the esophagus. Following red, right? When looking at the red color there, we see that it is the stomach, right? It is the stomach. Then you keep on marking your work. Then for pink, when looking at the color pink there, you find it on the small intestines, right? It is the small intestines. Then we have brown, right? And brown is our large intestine. Then we have also what? Purple. Purple is our liver, right? It is the liver. Then we have green, another green. When you look carefully there, just underneath there, the liver, you have the gallbladder. Then we have what? The pancreas as the yellow color, right? So after you have done marking your work and you need time to write corrections, I will give you about 2 minutes quickly to write down your corrections. But also remember, you can send in your answers, questions, or comments to this number 079 578 2908. Let's meet again after 2 minutes. Welcome back, grade 9s. Now let's continue with our lesson, right? Firstly, let's go through the important terms that have to do with the lesson. Right. The first term that we have there is digestion, right? And we define digestion as the mechanical and chemical processes that convert food into soluble nutrients, right? That is all that digestion is about, to break down food into smaller and simpler substances that can be able to be absorbed by the bloodstream, right? Then we have absorption, which is when now the soluble nutrients being taken up by the bloodstream in the intestines. Then we have saliva, which is the liquid secreted into the mouth by the salivary glands. We also have nutrient, which is an ingredient which nourishes the body. Also, we have ingestion, right? Which is the intake of food through the mouth by biting, by chewing, and so on, right? Also, we have digestion, which is undigested and waste products get passed out of the body through the anus. Then we have feces, which is waste material which is excreted through the anus. We also have enzyme, right? And enzymes are proteins that help speed up metabolism or the chemical reactions in our bodies. So they are simply catalysts that help to speed up the reaction, right? Also, we have peristalsis, which is a series of wave-like muscle contractions that move food through the digestive tract, right? That's all for our terminology. Now, I hope you grasp them, and also it will help you to understand as we move on together, right? So now, the alimentary canal. The alimentary canal are all the parts that take part, or they are all the parts that help with the breaking down of food to make it smaller and simpler and to be able to be absorbed in the bloodstream, right? So the alimentary canal is also another word for the digestive system. Are we together? So what is the function of the alimentary canal? As I've said, that the alimentary canal as a whole, it is there to be able to break down food into dissolved nutrients that can be absorbed into the bloodstream, right? So not only to be absorbed into the bloodstream, so that the bloodstream can be able to transport all these nutrients throughout each and every cell in our bodies. Are we okay? Right? So the main function is to break down food into dissolved nutrients that can be absorbed into the bloodstream and transported to cells throughout the body, right? And this is the structure of the alimentary canal, right? Which is a structure that I'm going to talk about more in depth in the coming slides. So it has different parts such as the mouth, salivary glands, esophagus, stomach, pancreas, large intestine, small intestine, the rectum, anus, liver, and the gallbladder, right? These are the different parts that take part in breaking down food and making sure that the food is in its soluble form, right? So as I've said, that the main parts or the main components of the alimentary canal, they include the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, intestines, rectum, and the anus. Now, moving on. So now, the food that we eat, right, it is presented in a beautiful plate, right? In a beautiful plate having different what? Nutrients. So the food that we eat, it needs to be broken down into smaller particles so that it can be absorbed by the body, right? Now let's look at our lovely meal here, right? We have some eggs, we have some avocados, we have some rice, we have some meat, and so on, right? But now, when it gets to our stomach, the food's form has changed, right? It has changed because of what? Of the process of digestion. We are breaking it down now into smaller and simpler substances, right? So looking at this plate now, we have also my friend here who's going to eat this food next to us, right? So now I want us to observe what happens as my friend is eating this food, right? So remember, the main process of the main goal of the alimentary canal is to break down food into smaller substances that can be able to be absorbed by the bloodstream. So what happens first? You firstly take in the food by ingesting it in your mouth, right? As you ingest the food, you start chewing to grind the food, to break it into smaller pieces, right? And also to soften it up with what? With your saliva, and to be able to break it down easily, right? So as the person now is chewing the food, what happens? The food it becomes smaller pieces, right? Or it becomes many small pieces, and it travels down now as a bolus in our esophagus, right? As it goes down in our esophagus, it goes down into our stomach, where further digestion takes place. From the stomach there on, as it moves along the alimentary canal, it goes into the small intestine, right? This is where now the food is in its simplest form, and it's going to be absorbed by the blood vessels that are around the small intestine. From there on, any indigestible material or undigested waste is going to enter the large intestine or the colon, right? This is where now it's going to experience further digestion, the fermentation of carbohydrates as well, right? To create what? waste products that we call feces. And the feces now are going to be passed out via the rectum as the whole process of digestion continues. All right. So now there are different phases of digestion, right? From when we enter the food or when we insert the food in our mouth, right? We start chewing, we eat, we swallow, and so on, right? So the first phase of digestion there is ingestion, right? It is ingestion. After ingestion, it is followed by movement of this food, right? The movement called peristalsis, which is the wave-like movements of what? Of the muscle or in our digestive tract, right? The wave-like contractions to move the food, right? Also, after that, it is the mechanical and the chemical digestion, the physical breaking down of food and the chemical breaking down of food. Following that is absorption, when you are going to have now the nutrients being absorbed from the small intestine into our bloodstream, right? And also we have egestion, right? So let's look at this diagram to support our statement here regarding the phases of digestion, right? So when looking at this picture here, right, the person firstly does what? They firstly put food in their mouth, they ingest, right? Then after ingesting, they're going to break down the food by chewing, by mixing the food with the saliva, by mashing the food and so on. Then the bolus is going to travel down the esophagus, right? Now as it travels down the esophagus, it's entering the second phase, which is what? Movement, right? Or peristalsis. As the food goes down with peristalsis, it enters the stomach. When it reaches the stomach now, the mechanical and chemical digestion, they continue to take place, right? To break down the food further into smaller pieces, right? From the stomach, it's going to enter the small intestines, right? As it enters the small intestines, there are a lot of what? Blood vessels around the intestine. So there's going to be what? There's going to be absorption of these nutrients that are carried by the food into the bloodstream and transported throughout the whole body, right? Then after that, any indigestible material, waste products, they're going to enter what? The colon or the large intestine, where further fermentation of carbohydrates takes place and also the concentration of waste products takes place, right? Then we have the formation of feces, which are going to be stored in the rectum. Then after that, they are going to be egested, right? Egested via the anus, right? So that's where now the phase of egestion takes place. But don't worry, we're going to talk more about this, right? So in the following slide, we are explaining now these steps or the phases as I've said in the previous slide, right? So ingestion, as I said, that ingestion, it's when you take in food into your mouth, right? It is the intake of food through the mouth. That's when you are ingesting. Secondly, digestion. Now, digestion is the breaking down of food into smaller particles, right? But now it happens in two types, right? Mechanical and the chemical process, right? So the mechanical and the chemical process that converts food into soluble nutrients. Another phase we talked about is absorption. And we said that absorption occurs when the soluble nutrients now are taken up by the bloodstream in the intestines and specifically the small intestines of the alimentary canal. Then we have egestion, right? Which occurs when undigested food materials called feces, right? They are called feces, and some of you know them as stools, right? The feces then are passed out of the body through the anus. Right. Now, before we continue further again, let's test ourselves quickly using activity 1, right? So activity 1 says, what is the system used when a person eats a meal? Then number 2 says, name the different parts through which the food moves in the system mentioned above from ingestion to egestion, right? So let's take a quick 3 minutes so for us to be able to answer the questions. Then after that, we shall continue with our lesson. Welcome back, grade 9s. Now let's look at the solutions together, right? Number one was saying, what is the system used when a person eats a meal? So I would like to highlight this word, right? Eats a meal, right? Not when they see the meal, because when they see the meal, it's another system at play, right? Now they are eating the meal. Which system is working during that time? And that is what? The digestive system, right? Because it's what we're talking about as well today, right? It is the digestive system, because when you are eating the meal, that's when now you are breaking down the food into smaller and simpler substances, right? Then number two, name the different parts which the food moves in the system mentioned above, from ingestion to egestion. Now, starting off with ingestion, we said that ingestion is the intake of food by the mouth, and egestion is what? Is the excreting of waste products via the anus, right? So it is entrance and exit. So now, what are the different parts in which the food travels from ingestion to egestion, right? So these are the different parts, starting off by the mouth as the ingesting, from the mouth to the esophagus, from the esophagus to the stomach, from the stomach to the small intestine, and from the small intestine into the large intestine, right? So please mark your work, right? And make sure that even your corrections are in this sequence, right? So let me give you a quick 2 minutes again to copy down the corrections. Then after that, we shall sail together with the boat. Welcome back again, grade 9s. Remember, our WhatsApp number is 079 should you want to send in your answers, questions, or any comments regarding this lesson, right? So now, moving on. Now let's talk about the functions and the structural adaptations of the digestive organs, right? Now, before we start, right, this is the alimentary canal. It has different parts that perform different functions for this system, the digestive system. Are we together? Such as the mouth for ingestion, we have the salivary glands as well that play a role in digestion by secreting what? Saliva to make the food soft and to make it easy to be broken down, right? We have parts such as the esophagus, which transports the food from the mouth into the stomach, and we have the stomach, which accommodates further digestion. We have the pancreas, which secretes insulin. We have the large intestine. We have the small intestine, where also absorption takes place. We have the rectum, the anus, the liver, and the gallbladder, right? And these parts are the parts that play an important role in making sure that the food is broken down into soluble nutrients. And the food or the nutrients are able to be absorbed into the bloodstream, and we are able to grow and also to gain those nutrients for our healthy living, right? Now, starting off with the mouth, right? Let's talk about the mouth firstly. How is it structurally suited for its function? First of all, when you think of the mouth, it has teeth inside it, right? Now, the teeth are there to mechanically break down the food into small pieces. Now, if you think of the teeth, right? If you think of the teeth are different as well, right? We have teeth such as incisors, canines, molars, and premolars, right? So what happens there? When you bite, your incisors are helping you to be able to bite the food, right? The canines are able to help you to tear down the food, right? The molars, you use them as you chew the food. Are we together? So the teeth, they mechanically break down food into small pieces. And inside the mouth, we also have the tongue, right? The tongue also now mixes what? The food with the saliva, right? It mixes the food with the saliva, which contains amylase, right? To be able to help to break down starch, right? And also there is an epiglottis, which is a flap-like structure at the back of the throat that closes over the trachea, preventing food from entering it, right? And it is in the pharynx. So now think of it. Sometimes you are eating and you are talking at the same time. Then it happens that you choke, right? This is because of what? The epiglottis could not what? It could not cover the trachea as you are eating, right? It could not cover the trachea, and the food travels down the trachea, which is your windpipe. Then you reflex by coughing. Now, from the mouth, we have the esophagus, right? So now the esophagus, if you think of the esophagus, here is the structure of the esophagus, right? It is responsible for taking down food from the mouth into the stomach. So how is it structurally suited for its function? Now let's think of it, right? The walls of the esophagus and the rest of the canal, they are built up of muscle layers. And the esophagus is about 20 centimeters long, right? It is about 20 centimeters long. So now, these muscle layers, they enable the esophagus to be able to contract and relax as the food moves down by peristalsis, right? So the esophagus also, it has a function of secreting mucus, right? To make the food go down easily and to trap foreign particles such as dust particles from entering what? Your tract, right? It secretes mucus and it moves food from the throat to the stomach using muscle movement called peristalsis, right? So this peristalsis, we said it is wave-like contractions of muscles to help to move the food down, right? So as you can see now, this is peristalsis taking place here in the esophagus, right? Look at these wave-like contractions as the food goes down and travels into the stomach. Sometimes you also experience what? Too much acid from the stomach, and if the acid rises up and it gets into the esophagus, that's when we experience what we call heartburn. Now moving on to the next part, the stomach, right? How is the stomach structurally suited for its function? First of all, the stomach is a J-shaped muscular bag, right? It is a J-shaped muscular, right? Muscular bag, right? It also helps with peristalsis moving down of food. So it is a J-shaped muscular bag that stores the food that you eat and breaks it down into tiny pieces. But now, it also mixes the food with digestive juices that contain enzymes to break down proteins and lipids. And also in the stomach, we find what we call hydrochloric acid, right? So the hydrochloric acid in the stomach helps to kill bacteria as well, and also it helps with digestion. So now, obviously, the food that was in the plate traveling in your mouth, into your esophagus and in the stomach is quite different now, because now it is mixed with digestive juices, mixed with mucus, mixed with saliva and so on, right? So the food that we find inside the stomach is called chyme, right? The food or the liquid that we find in the stomach now is called chyme. Now, moving on to the small intestine, right? Because now the food, that is the path that the food travels from the stomach, it goes into the small intestine. So the small intestines are roughly about 7 meters long. So if you were to elongate or stretch them, small intestines, you'd find out that they are 7 meters long. Now, how is the small intestine structurally suited for its function? The lining of these intestine walls, they have finger-like projections, right? And those finger-like projections, they are called villi, right? The villi is there to help to increase the surface area for absorption, right? So now the villi are also covered in microvilli, which also further increases surface area for absorption of the nutrients that we are looking for here. So these are the small intestines from our diagram, right? In this pink color, these are our small intestines, right? These are the ones that are lined with villi and microvilli to be able to increase surface area for absorption. So these are the villi inside inside the lining of our small intestines. Now, the small intestine as well, remember, this is where absorption takes place, right? So the nutrients from the food pass into the bloodstream through the small intestine walls, right? This is where absorption of these nutrients takes place. Now, looking at our diagram here, right? These are the small intestine. Now, look at this, right? They are coiled or are surrounded by the blood vessels, right? They are surrounded by the blood vessels, and these blood vessels, they draw the nutrients into the bloodstream and transport the nutrients throughout the whole body. So in the small intestine, there's some absorption of about 80% ingested water, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, lipids, which are our fats and oils, right? Now moving on to the large intestine, right? The large intestine is known as the colon as well. And the large intestine is about 1.5 meters long, right? Its length is about 1.5 meters long. So looking at our diagram here, right? We're looking at this brown picture here. That is our colon, right? The colon, or what we know as the large intestine, right? That is our large intestine. So it is about 1.5 meters long, right? So now remember here, it is after absorption of nutrients has taken place in the small intestine, right? So now the large intestine is responsible for receiving whatever that was not properly digested by the small intestines, right? So it receives what the small intestines do not absorb. And as well as it is connected to the rectum, right? The rectum, which is a short-term storage which holds feces before they are expelled. Now, another thing about the large intestines, right? This is where now the concentration of waste material takes place, right? Its function is to deal with bacterial digestion by doing what? By fermenting carbohydrates as well, right? It ferments carbohydrates, and also this is where the concentration of waste products takes place, and more absorption of water takes place also in the large intestine, or what we call the colon, right? So that is not all about the digestive system. Remember, we have also accessory glands or accessory organs, which we know as the glands, right? Which include the liver, the bladder, and the pancreas, right? So I would like for us to talk about them one by one, right? So now remember that these parts, or the accessory glands, they are not part of the path of food, but they play a critical role in digesting as well. Starting off with the liver, right? The liver now directly affects digestion by producing bile. Its main function is to secrete and produce bile, right? That is its main function in digestion, right? So looking at our diagram, this is the liver, right? Which is colored purple. This is the liver of our alimentary canal, right? It produces and secretes bile, right? So now, what is this function of the what is the function of this bile? The bile is there to help digest fats, right? It is there to help with the digestion of fats. And also the liver, its function is to filter out toxins, waste products such as drugs and alcohol, and also poisons, right? That is the main function of the liver. And this is what the liver looks like, right? Now, connected to the liver, can you see that there is what? A gallbladder, right? There is a gallbladder. The gallbladder is the one that stores this bile that is produced by the liver. So looking at our structure also here is the bile, right? The one in green color there. It is the bile and it is the gallbladder, sorry. It is the gallbladder, and the gallbladder, it's there to store bile from the liver and releases it into the small intestine to help digest fats, right? Now the pancreas. The pancreas is also an important accessory gland of the digestive system, right? So the pancreas now, it has a different role as well, but it produces what? Digestive enzymes to digest fats as well, carbohydrates and proteins, right? So it regulates also the levels of sugar in the blood, right? It regulates blood sugar by producing insulin, right? It produces insulin to be able to help to regulate the levels of sugar in our blood. Now, we also have the rectum, which I've spoken about, right? The rectum, I said it is connected to the colon. So the rectum is the temporary storage for feces or stools, right? They are temporarily stored in the rectum before being ingested, right? This is where you feel that now it's too much, now I need to go to the loo, right? I need to relieve myself. This is where you've experienced what? The pressure, right? Right there in the rectum. So the rectum is this part here, and it's a muscular bag that is able to store the feces temporarily before being expelled. Now, connected to the rectum is the anus, right? The anus now is the end opening of the digestive system through which wastes are ingested, right? This is the part where wastes such as feces are ingested. Now looking at our diagram, right? This is the end opening here, right? Right there at the end, right? And this is where you'd find it on your body, right? Right there at the end, it is the end opening that helps to ingest waste products such as feces during what? Ingestion. So now, there are two types of digestion, right, that we need to highlight. There are two types of digestion, right? There is mechanical digestion and also chemical digestion, right? So now, reminding you again, mechanical is the physical part of digestion, right? Where we break down food by chewing, by tearing, by grinding, mashing, and mixing the food with our tongues, right? We are mechanically doing what? Digesting the food, physically breaking down the food. Then there's also chemical digestion, right? Which is the enzymatic reactions to improve the digestion of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. So now I want us to test ourselves using activity 2, right? So let's go through the questions. Number 1 is saying, what is the main function of the digestive system? Then number 2 is saying, name and describe the processes that occur in A, the stomach, B, the large intestine, C, the mouth, and D, the small intestine, right? So number 1, what is the main function of the digestive system? Number 2, name and describe the processes that occur in A, the stomach, the large intestine, the mouth, and the small intestine. So I'm going to give you a quick 5 minutes to write down your answers. Then after that, we shall resume with our lesson. Welcome back again, grade 9s. I hope you have been enjoying this activity, right? You are still waiting for your responses on 079 578 2908. Right, let's go through the solutions, right? But firstly, let's remind each other of the questions. Number one, what is the main function of the digestive system? Number two, name and describe the processes that occur in A, the stomach, B, the large intestine, C, the mouth, and D, the small intestine. Now, looking at our solutions, number one, the main function of the digestive system is to break down food into a soluble form that can be absorbed by the bloodstream. When you mark your work, then number two, right? Number two, digestion, right? Digestion is digestion is the mechanical and chemical processes that convert insoluble food into soluble nutrients. That's what happens in the stomach, right? Then B, digestion, right? It occurs when the undigested food materials, which are feces, are passed out of the body. Then C is ingestion, right? The intake of food by biting, chewing, and swallowing, right? Then D, what process takes place then? It is what? Absorption. And it occurs when the soluble nutrients are taken up by the bloodstream, right? So now, let me give you another quick 2 minutes to copy down the corrections. Welcome back again, grade 9s. Now I hope you had enough time to copy down the corrections, right? So let's quickly wrap up our lesson for today by summarizing today's lesson in this format. Right, today we're talking about the alimentary canal and digestion, right? So we said that the alimentary canal are all the parts that help to break down food into smaller and simpler substances that can be absorbed into the bloodstream, right? So the alimentary canal has different parts which perform different functions for them for the system, right? So now starting off with the mouth, right? The mouth is where processes such as ingestion take place, right? Ingestion takes place in the mouth, where now you take in your food, and when it enters your mouth, there are parts such as the teeth and the tongue, right? The teeth, they help to grind, to mash, and also to chew the food, right? whereas the tongue secretes saliva which contains amylase, right, to be able to help to break down starch, right? And saliva also does what? It softens up the food for easy digestion. Then now you have the esophagus, right, which is responsible for taking down food from the mouth into the stomach, right? And also there's a certain process that takes place in the esophagus, right, which is peristalsis, right? Peristalsis. And we say that peristalsis is the wave-like contractions of the muscles to help to bring the food down or to transport the food, right? So it helps with the movement of food as these wave-like contractions of the muscles of the esophagus to help to put down the food into the stomach, right? And we also said that the esophagus is about 20 centimeters long and it transports food from the mouth into the stomach. Now, when you get to the stomach, right? Stomach, there's further digestion taking place, right? Further digestion taking place, whether it is mechanical, right? Mechanical and also chemical, right? So there's mechanical and chemical breakdown of food in the stomach. The stomach contains digestive juices and some enzymes to help break down the food further, breaking down the food in the form of proteins and lipids as well, right? And also there's hydrochloric acid to help also kill the bacteria in the stomach. Then after that, the food travels down into your small intestine, right? Your small intestine, this is where absorption takes place, right? Absorption takes place where? In the small intestine, where now the soluble nutrients that are found in the small intestine, they are absorbed from the small intestine into our bloodstream. And from our bloodstream, it is transported throughout the cells in our whole body, right? Then from there on, whatever that is not digested is going to enter the large intestine. And in the large intestine, you start to have what? Fermentation of carbohydrates as well, concentration of waste. So this is where the phase of digestion starts or takes place, right? Because now we're going to have waste products that are going to be concentrated and they're going to be stored in the rectum, right? They're going to be stored in the rectum. Then after that, they're going to be expelled via the anus, right? They're expelled via the anus. So also the anus plays a role in digestion, in taking out the feces from the body, right? And we also said that there is accessory glands or accessory organs where which take place in which help with digestion as well in the alimentary canal. To name them, starting off with what? The liver, the gallbladder, right? The gallbladder, and also the pancreas. Also, these glands, they have different functions to perform for the alimentary canal. Yes, they are not part of the path of food, but they play a big role in digestion, right? For instance, the liver produces bile, right? Bile helps with digestion of fats, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder. Whereas the pancreas now, it also plays a role in regulating the levels of sugar in our blood, right? By excreting what? By secreting what? By secreting insulin, right? So these are the different parts of the alimentary canal or the digestive system. They all play a big role in the digestive system, and they help us to break down food further into smaller and simpler substances, right? So I hope you have enjoyed today's lesson and the term as a whole, right? From me to you now, until next time, thank you and goodbye.